Welcome back, everyone, to Unhoused and Unfiltered. I'm Nick Cook, Director of Public Policy for the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. And unfortunately, today, it's just me. You will not hear from my colleague, Sarah Prout-Rennie, who is our Senior Director of Advocacy and Engagement. She's under the weather today, so we're wishing her the best. But we have a lot to cover today. A lot has been going on in the news, and a lot's been going on in Washington, D.C., and homelessness is the focus of a lot of this. And what we want to really talk about is do a deep dive into the budget recommendation that the president submitted on April 3rd to Congress. And really, before we get started, the only way we can do this is by you liking and subscribing to our podcasts. Go back, watch episode 1 through 5. This is episode 6. This is amazing. We're doing some great work here. We're enjoying it. You all are sharing it, liking it. Go out there. Tell us if we're doing a good job. Give us a rating. 5 stars is appreciated. But take a moment, give us some feedback, and like and subscribe. Also, we can do this because of generous memberships of those at Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. So go to the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness website at myhomeless.org and become a member of MICA. Because with your membership, we can do things like this. We can continue to advocate. We can continue to talk about the issues surrounding the unhoused and those that are precariously housed. So please feel free to become a member and help us do this work. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about the president's budget proposal that was released on 3 April to Congress. And what I want to set this up with is that the president proposed $1.5 trillion in defense spending this year. That is the largest defense spending budget ever. It also calls for an increase in battleships. We have not had battleships for years. And those that know me know I'm an Army guy, know that I will take any chance to rib the Navy. But the amount of expenditures into battleships for the Navy is just not needed at this time and place. We also have the ongoing conflict in Iran, which we heard this past few weeks that it was costing $25 billion so far. All that, to say all that, we took a 10% cut across all non-defense spending. And really what that does is it takes our most vulnerable population, our unhoused, our senior citizens, our families, those with disabilities, really puts them at a disadvantage and really makes them even more vulnerable to becoming homeless and staying unhoused. And I just want to go through some of the items in the president's budget recommendation and really talk about these items and how it plays into the larger picture and how this all impacts homelessness and the unhoused. But again, before we get started, like and subscribe to Unhoused and Unfiltered and get us out in front of more people. Like I said, all non-defense spending took about a 10% cut. And this year's transportation, housing, and urban development budget was proposed $73.5 billion. That was down from the fiscal year 26 of $77.3 billion. Now, if you remember, the president really proposed a 50% cut in FY26. Congress stepped in, advocate through the help of advocacy from all of you, all those in the communities, through national organizations. And what this really did was rejected the president's proposal, and Congress stepped up and really made sure that those that were precariously housed and unhoused received the services they deserve. But with this president's budget proposal, programs that he did not fund, included the Community Development Block Grant. This is what your community uses from the federal government to provide homeless services, to do things like weatherization, to do things like community development, to do downtown initiatives, all kinds of things. This community development block grant goes to your community to provide different types of services and things that the community needs and has asked for. The Home Investment Partnership. This is a very bipartisan program that has been supported by both Republicans and Democrats and has received a lot of support from our own Michigan congressional delegation. So that was not funded. HOPWA, also known as the housing opportunities for people with AIDS. This HOPWA grant has been out there since the late 80s, has housed thousands and thousands of people, have maintained their been able to maintain their housing. That funding was completely eliminated. Again, another program that was supported by both sides of the aisles over the years and has a lot of support. The funding was recommended for elimination last year with the president's budget proposal, and this year, again, it was eliminated. Congress last year put it back in. We're hoping Congress does it again this year. Indian housing block grants are Native American partners across the reservations. This helps really develop housing for Native American tribes. That was eliminated. The pro housing grant was eliminated. Eviction protection. The number one thing to stop homelessness is eviction protections. And yet that was eliminated. Those types of things really put vulnerable people that are maybe living paycheck to paycheck. As Sarah always says, 40% of Michiganders live paycheck to paycheck. When you remove that protection, such as the eviction protection grants, you're going to see a spike in evictions. You're going to see a spike in homelessness. And really removing that social safety net is really puts people at risk. And those are types of things that really don't work. The other thing that was announced in the budget would be there would be no federal funding for new permanent supportive housing construction. We know through the HMIS data in the state of Michigan that permanent supportive housing is 95% successful. This is for those that are above the age of 65, those with severe disabilities, severe mental health issues. This really gives somebody stable housing and then puts the supportive services around it to ensure that they're successful. This isn't just give them a house, let them go. This makes sure that they have the supportive service and that permanency of their housing to be successful. And the numbers explain itself. 95% successful. That means 95% of people that enter this program do not return to homelessness in the next 3 years. So, a great investment. It is cheaper than transitional housing, and it ensures success. So, we hope we see this continued as we go forward. Additionally, there was no funding for the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. Coming out of this year's PIT counts, we're hearing anecdotally across the state, across the country, we continue to see a rise in youth homelessness. This typically means kids, young adults under the age of 26, many young adults aging out of foster care, LGBTQ youth that families have forced them out, and then college students that just cannot afford to pay for college and to pay for housing and work a job and be successful. So we're just continuing as we see those economic conditions where wages stay stagnant and rents continue to increase. It puts our young adults at further and further risk of housing instability and becoming homeless. So again, programs that are successful have been identified for elimination or reduction to the point where they will no longer exist. And what this really does is it takes our marginalized communities and further pushes them to the edge. And we don't want any of that. So, The homeless assistance grants, which we've alluded to in previous podcasts, provides about $108 million annually to the continuums of care throughout Michigan. We'll see a decrease of $393 million this year. Again, that's across the entire country, but it is that elimination that shows that homelessness is not a priority for the current housing and urban development and the presidency. So what happens is that $393 million reduction, it makes the homeless assistance grants be reframed as expanded emergency solutions grants. What does this mean? It means really focusing on transitional housing and emergency sheltering. As we've talked about before, in the homeless management information system in the state of Michigan, we know transitional housing is only 65% effective of keeping people housed. Why is that important? Because transitional housing traditionally costs more than permanent housing solutions. It's just because it takes more people to run those facilities. It takes security. It takes checking people in. That continuous transient demographic that we're seeing in homelessness just makes it hard to give permanency, and it costs more. Keeping up with the facilities, maintaining the facilities, they're larger. Your cost of utilities are going to increase. Staffing increase. Those are your two largest drivers of what makes transitional housing expensive. Even things like the Mod Pods in Lansing, it costs between $800,000 and $1.2 million a year to continue to run those things for only 54 individuals. And that's in perpetuity, and that's just temporary. Now, could those investments be better in permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, eviction protections, rental assistance? We can run the numbers, we can talk about those numbers, but yes, obviously. But transitional housing does play a role. So does emergency shelters. We know that they're needed during crisis. We know they're needed during winter months, especially here in Michigan. So again, it's not a either or, but it's an and situation. We need investment into the entire homeless response system to ensure success of the system. Going back to some data, we unhoused Michiganders every year. Well, every year we put about 50% into permanent housing, either through rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, housing choice vouchers. All those programs together gets about 50% of the individuals off the street and into something permanent. However, every year we have about 50% enter into the system that are first-time homelessness, between 16 and 17,000 in the state of Michigan every year. Therefore, we just continuously have this churn of about 33,000 people with no new investments. So it is a build, transitional housing, permanent housing, all that together will make for a successful system. But if you only invest in one portion, only that portion is going to be successful. The permanency will not be successful. So it's an and conversation. The HUD rental assistance recommendation in the president's budget replaces existing community service requirements with 20 hours of approved work activities. Again, we don't know what these approved work activities are. We know that the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people in permanent housing, in rapid rehousing, already work. We know that from the GAP report, from the Alice report, that people are living paycheck to paycheck in Michigan, and that the economic opportunities or lack thereof is really driving the housing crisis. When you have stagnant wages, people are living paycheck to paycheck, they're only one moment from being homeless. Or because of a new developer or new owner buys the development and increases the rent. Since COVID has ended, rents in Michigan have gone up 25%. You've all heard me say that many, many times. What does that mean? Wages would need to go up 25% to keep up with that, or people are going to end up living paycheck to paycheck. We know from the data through the NILH, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, NLHC's gap report, that 70% of those that are in the extremely low income category have cost burden rents. Means 50% of their income goes towards rent. And we know in Michigan that the 100% of the AMI is about $97,000. So that means people making $29,000 or less are paying 50% of their income towards rent. That means about $14,000 to $15,000 per household is paying towards rent. And I think any of us can agree that that is extremely expensive. Think about you as an individual or your family. If you're paying 50% of your monthly income towards rent or mortgage, would you be able to afford the way you're living now? I think the answer for all of us would be no. So those are things that we need to kind of figure out. How do we stabilize the housing? How do we make it affordable for people to live in the housing that they need to survive? Also, under the rental assistance, they have proposed a 5-year time limit with exemptions. Obviously, some of these exemptions are disabilities, senior citizens, but overall, we believe those are the end of the exceptions. So that really puts the working poor at a disadvantage. How do you continue to work, not have a increase in wage, yet you're on a timeline proposed by people that just want to move you through the system? So are we going to see families return to homelessness? Are we going to see young adults return to homelessness if they can't find a way to sustain these increased rents once they come off of rental assistance? Tenant-based rental assistance, or also known as the Housing Choice Voucher Program, will see a $608 million increase. Now, that seems like a lot of money. That seems like, oh, that's great. But because of the rate of inflation and because what we're seeing across the board with rents increasing, this will essentially be a cut. Why? Because it won't cover all those vouchers that are out there. So again, you're going to have people that have been stably housed, living somewhere, lose their rental assistance, and then be back out on the streets. This is a scary situation for a lot of people. And they won't know until it's them that are chosen. And what is going to be the criteria? Who's going to be chosen? Why are they going to be chosen? And it really makes people concerned. You think about this, and we've talked about it many times before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are we going to now remove that shelter out of that hierarchy of needs, and now they're going to stop work training, stop going to school, stop going to their job because they're trying to just survive, picking up a third shift, picking up a fourth shift, working nonstop, working while they're sick, which then causes other problems, skipping appointments for their children. Those are all things that when we cut housing and sheltering, will be a trickle-down effect onto the entire society. This isn't just about an individual. This is about a family, about a community. And we really need to have these discussions on what we will accept as needed services for our community. And I think most of us can agree our unhoused population, our precariously housed population needs social support so that they can be successful and that our whole community can thrive. Other notable sections that received cuts, Section 202 received a funding cut. This is your housing for senior citizens. I think we can all agree that Social Security is not increasing, that a lot of our senior citizens are living month to month. They have more they have more mouth than month, meaning they take in more, they consume more than they actually receive in assistance. So what happens is when you take away Section 202, you're putting our senior citizens in a more vulnerable state. Again, going back to this year's PIT count, we're seeing increases across the country, and Michigan's no exception, of more senior citizens living on the street. And I don't think anybody wants to see senior citizens on the street. You think about your grandmother. My grandmother lived in a HUD development in Flint. Without that HUD development, she probably would not have been able to afford any other place where she lived. It was that ability to have those services and that apartment for her when she was a senior citizen that allowed her to live independently for much longer. It's also, how do we treat those that came before us? You think about the generation that is now at the age of senior citizens. It's your greatest generation. Is ending soon. We've now moved on to the baby boomers, the ones that helped and drive the develop the IT world, the modern systems that we have, the modern they helped drive that. Their parents were the ones that built this country after World War II. What are we doing to them that we're not giving them a safe, stable place to live? So again, Section 202 is very important. That is your senior citizen housing. We need to make sure that that stays intact. One of the other notable sections in the president's proposal was it prohibits public housing authorities from issuing any new vouchers or otherwise new families. What does that mean? Does that mean if a community has a housing choice voucher that's available, they can't give it to a family in need? Do they allow that home family to stay unhoused? Do they keep them in transitional housing? Or does the community have to pick it up? This is, again, an unfunded mandate. And if we have the housing choice vouchers available, why should they not be used? Why should they not be put families in stable housing? There were two exceptions to that. HUD-VASH, which is your veterans housing. Veterans would still be able to qualify for a housing choice voucher, and family reunification. If you're trying to bring a family back together that's been split up because of the situation that they're living in, then yes, the housing choice voucher could be used. But for the average person, your survivor of domestic violence, they would no longer be eligible. Raises a lot of questions on what we're valuing in the community and what we want to do to help our most vulnerable. One good thing that came out of this budget proposal was the HUD and the president recognized that we're seeing a lot of youth aging out of foster care, ending up on the streets. So there was a $30 million proposal to provide housing choice vouchers for those individuals. That is great news. I encourage that. Again, it's an and conversation. It's not either this or that. It's and. So we need the housing choice vouchers and the $30 million for those aging out of foster care. This is great. We all know communities that are seeing increased young adults on the streets, and we want to do that. Now, I do want to talk about a proposal here for $30 million for the Program Integrity Initiative. This is the HUD administration's fighting fraud, waste, and abuse. I don't think anybody disagrees that there needs to be accountability. In my experience and my knowledge, we're not going to see $30 million worth of fraud, waste, and abuse coming out of what they're asking for. They increase financial accountability and oversight. This is great. I welcome it. Let's show what we're doing. You'll see that our nonprofits out there are working tirelessly and without a lot of the supports they need. It also goes down to subgrantees. So if you have a grantee receiving money from HUD, then they subgrant it. The transparency will go down to them also. Again, great. So many of our nonprofits work tirelessly and continue to fight for their clients, even though they're not funded to do those things. So let's take a look at the books. Let's see what's going on. Now, this is where it really gets tricky. And this is where it's really open-ended. They don't want rental assistance to be used for deceased tenants. Because there's such a demand for housing choice vouchers and, project-based rentals, I really doubt you'll see a vast majority of deceased tenants, people living with these vouchers. Will you see some people? Maybe carrying on. I'm not going to doubt that this has happened in the past, but this is not a practice that is commonly occurring. Non-citizens. We know the administration's approach to non-U.S. citizens. We know with the mixed status rule that they put out for a comment, they're trying to eliminate even families that have a U.S. citizen and a non-U.S. citizen, trying to push them further and further into the margins, especially if they're asking for help, by not making them eligible for housing. We can have these discussions, but it's when you have U.S. citizens that aren't being housed because they're married to somebody that is a non-U.S. citizen. To me, that's just a hard pill to swallow. But if that's something they want to fight, then let's have that discussion publicly. This is the catch-all, and this is where people should be concerned regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. Entities that use funding to proselytize woke agendas. Do we know what that even means? Do we know that that includes LGBTQ, DEI initiatives, housing first initiatives? What defines proselytizing woke agendas? To me, everybody is an American. Everybody's a human. We need to treat each other with dignity and respect. And when you use things like proselytize woke agendas, if you are somebody that was doing DEI housing or LGBTQ because you saw those communities marginalized and the last administration encouraged you to reach out to those communities to get them housed, why are we now punishing you for something that was asked of you under the last administration? That should be wrong regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. This is important. When you say proselytizing woke agendas, again, what do you mean? Where do you want to go with this? Are you willing to put people out on the streets because a group 2 years ago supported LGBTQ initiatives to ensure outreach to those communities to make sure that those individuals that had been marginalized received housing? I have a hard time understanding what that attacks. And it's really unfortunate. So, I think we have to do some internal looking and some conversations about what right looks like, and sometimes stand on the harder side of what is right. You know, so that brings me to where we are now. What I'm asking you all to do is to go to myhomeless.org, go to our legislative tracker, find the call to action asking you to email, to write your congressional office and support evidence-based practices, trauma-informed practices that house individuals. And what this starts with is providing $5.1 billion in homeless assistance grants. That'll include the Continuum of Care and Emergency Solution grants. Also, we would love to see maintaining 85% of the annual renewal demand. What this is every year the Continuums of Care rebid their contracts. They go out there what services they already provide. And every year they're allowed to renew some of those without really explaining why they need this. And it's important because those people are stably housed. They went through the program last year. Why remove that option? Allow them to be stably housed. Continue to fund those programs. So we're also asking use the local data, which allows projects best respond to the community specific needs. I mean, some communities need more permanent supportive housing, some need more rapid rehousing, some need more transitional housing, some need more emergency shelters. Each community is unique. Allow the communities to decide what's best for their community, what they need. Maybe it's rental assistance, maybe it's eviction protection. All these things play into the calculus and allow the community to decide what's best for them. We also need to better address homelessness and expand capacity for priority populations. That includes our older adults, which we've already seen an increase in, our homeless youth, which we've seen an increase in, survivors of domestic violence, and those that have complex mental health needs. So we need to ensure that that is funded and continue to be funded. We also need emergency solutions to get people off the street quickly and outreach dollars. All that to ensure we have a successful program. We also need $45.6 billion in the tenant-based rental assistance. This allows people that are already receiving assistance to maintain assistance. And we also want to see $1.85 billion for supporting housing for elderly. That's that Section 202, which we've already talked about. We, again, seeing Social Security stay flat, need more investment, allowing individuals who are at risk or experiencing homelessness above the age of 55 be stably housed. That's really, really important. We also want to stop the shift of all funding to emergency shelter grants away from Housing First initiatives. We know Housing First works. Again, go back to allowing the community to decide what is best for them. Don't cut resources needed for shelter, housing, and supportive services. To transition it all to transitional sheltering and emergency sheltering. Let's have this and conversation. Homelessness is a complex issue. It's not a one size fits all. As many of you have heard me say before in earlier podcasts, for every Michigander out there, there's 33,000 stories of why they're homeless. Many are dealing with trauma through domestic violence, veterans with PTSD, youth being abused in foster care, LGBTQ youth kicked out of their home because they are LGBTQ. All this is trauma, and we need solutions that address that trauma and to tie homeless service providers' hands and remove their opportunity to connect to these individuals really does a disservice. We are the greatest nation in the world. I truly believe that. I fought for this country. And I really think we need to take care of those in our community. Um, you know, we need to just continue to invest in the homeless response system. And I'm asking you all to go out and click on our advocacy tracker, our legislative tracker. Click on that message, email your congressional person, and continue to talk. The one thing we also talked about is the Fair Housing Office of HUD would receive significant cuts under this administration. Don't put our most vulnerable even into a more vulnerable position. This isn't just about racial equity, DEI. This is from everywhere from a senior citizen being not receiving the services they deserve because they're a senior citizen. This is for a biracial family not being accepted into housing because they're biracial. This fair housing deals with all the issues of fair housing. I think we can all agree that everybody should have the same right to housing, and to remove those protections or at least degrade the fair housing program just makes it even exacerbates the situation, makes it harder for those individuals to get into housing. So let's do more. Let's protect our most vulnerable. Let's make sure they're able to advocate for themselves, get the support services they need. Let's not make it harder. We talk about all these things that the president's budget does not do. The state, we're also in the state budget cycle. In the last Senate proposed version of the state budget, there was $30 million set aside for housing first priorities and the continuums of care. This is just a start. We need investment from the state, from locals. We need wherever we can find investments, philanthropic groups. Make those investments so that our communities are successful. Across the board, under this last year's PIT count, we've seen an increase in the unhoused in every community. And it's not because people are making bad choices or that they aren't working hard enough. It's an economic reality. Rents are increasing, wages are staying stagnant. More and more people are living paycheck to paycheck. One bad day can lead anybody to homelessness. And so we really need to work together to ensure we have more money for street outreach to connect those people to the resources they deserve. We need more money for permanent supportive housing and the supportive services they deserve, and rapid rehousing. How do we get people into housing or keep them in housing when they're at risk of losing that housing? This is a statewide conversation. When I go across the state, I was just down in the Jackson talking to their COC. I was in Ypsilanti for the Region K housing regional partnership meeting, talking to them. Everybody understands the situation we're in, and the more we talk about it, the more real it becomes, the more people understand about the situation. It is doom and gloom. Not that I want it to be that way. I would love to talk about all the great things that all of our partners are doing, like Khadijah, Lisa Reinecke, all these conversations we've had over the years with different groups doing amazing work. But the pot of money is getting smaller and smaller. We need a true investment, not only from the federal government, but from the state. And that $30 million is a start to focus on permanent supportive housing, wraparound services, rapid rehousing, ensure our homeless management information system database becomes funded in perpetuity, put $1.3 million towards that. And then also street outreach. Sarah Rennie and I were talking last week with Khadijah, talking about how Ingham County, the size it is with the state capital, 110,000, only gets $18,000 for street outreach. That's a drop in the bucket. When you think about the homeless population in your area or up north where they're trekking through woods for hours at a time to come in contact with the homeless population, a lot more money's needed. That way we can have trauma-informed care. We can have people meet where they live. Think about it as you. What's easier? When your insurance man comes to your house, your investment firm comes to your house and says, what can we do for you? Think about unhoused individuals as that. When our street outreach teams go out into the community, when they go out into the encampments, that's going to their house, connecting to them, seeing what is needed. How can we support you? And really, that is what's needed. I think it's an investment that has been not really thought about for a while. Again, I talked about that $30 million in Section 406 of the general government budget, or the labor employment opportunity budget under MISHDA. That's $30 million from CDBG to do exactly that: housing first, support our COCs, and we need to think of creative ways. We need to figure out how to reach out to communities. So I'm asking you all to go to our legislative tracker, send those letters to the members of Congress. We'll be putting out a letter out there for the state to support that $30 million. And talk to your local officials at the county level. We have homeless millages in some counties in the state that do things like provide rental assistance, eviction protections. At the state level, we need to continue these conversations on eviction protections by expungement of evictions, permanent rental assistance, and just have these conversations. We're not going to get there by ourselves. It's all of you out there advocating. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. Go to our website, myhomeless.org. Become a member. We can continue to advocate because of your membership. When you get this, if you liked this podcast, subscribe, share it, give it a review. We keep moving up on the charts on the iTunes. It's exciting, but without your input, this wouldn't be possible. So if you have an idea for a show, or if you actually want to become a member of MICA, please do so. We do this because we love our jobs and we want to get the message out there. But thank you for listening today. We'll see you next time. And go ahead, subscribe to this podcast, and give us a review. Thank you, and have a great day.